So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today I have Jascha Kaykas-Wolff, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Mozilla. I caught up with Jascha recently at Collision, a tech and startup conference that took place in New Orleans recently. And we talked about all sorts of things, including customer experience, engagement, trust, etc. etc. He shared some really interesting insights, so I hope you enjoy the conversation.
I think that's a fascinating path, though. I think this whole conversation around customer experience as like a separate mandate is a pretty big challenge in the industry. And I think that we see organizations operate like organisms, and they kind of create antibodies to take care of sick parts of it. And like when we ask ourselves, like, why would you need a separate discipline that's just focusing on customer experience? Well, one, like, you want to create a great customer experience, but two, like, we've created so many silos inside of organizations whose principal responsibility isn't creating a great customer experience. It's driving top line profit. It's pushing out more widgets. It's
I did a talk the other day, and the thing that I kind of shared with them, which I thought was quite interesting, was this idea that on average most large organizations right now have they're serving their customers through about 9 different channels. Yeah. And that number is going to go up to about 11 in the next 18 months, 24 months. Yes. And yet they talk about siloed behavior, they talk about non-connected kind of channels. Right. We've been talking about a single unified view of the customer for the last, I don't know,
It's been about 20 years, at least 20 years.
And yet what they're doing is they're just adding kind of channels, adding new teams, and it's basically adding more silos. Yeah. And you're a bit like, at some point you have to just stop. Yeah. Right? You have to just go, this is madness.
Yeah. You'll appreciate this, like, as a system thinker. Like, I know that we didn't come necessarily to talk about this, but when I joined the profession of marketing, it was by accident, right?
Right.
Like 20 years later, I still say I'm a product person who like fell into marketing accidentally. I love it. Yeah. But the discipline that I grew up in was around product management, product development, and the world of product development and product management was 100% focused on the customer. It was like, do the research, understand the segment, understand the pains of the segment, figure out how you're going to solve those problems, and then prove it with the features that you're developing. Yeah. And seems super clear and simple. When a couple of colleagues and I ended up building a big team that grew into a bigger part of the business at Microsoft, I was the lone non-technical person, the founding team. Right. So they're like, hey, can you handle the marketing stuff? And I'm like, yeah, I guess. And so we started hiring and bringing marketing people in. And I didn't understand the processes that many of the marketers, this is back 15 plus years ago, were using. I was like, well, this seems abstracted from the value that we're trying to deliver to the customers that we're building the product for. So like, there must be a reason. Can you rationalize it? Can you help me understand it? And there was never really an answer, a set of answers that satiated the question that I had. Certainly there was answers, but it just didn't quite lock it for me. And so kind of without knowing any better, I looked into the product world and the systems that the product teams used, and I was like, well, why don't we just use those in marketing as well? And in particular, in product at the time, we were using lean manufacturing processes, agile processes. And so we pulled them directly into the marketing team and just started using them in the same way. And the output wasn't just kind of better and different kinds of performance. It was a pretty fundamental shift in the way that we actually thought about the work that we did. Mm-hmm. It became customer focused, even out of the language that we were using. You create a user story, and the user story may be a piece of a marketing program, but always the language was, who's the person that I'm trying to impact? How am I trying to impact them in a positive way? What are the things I need to do to contribute to that? And it's been fascinating for the last 15 years using that discipline, the agile discipline in marketing groups, because the challenge that most marketing teams that at least I join and when we first start to use these systems deal with is the fact that we have to change all of our language and processes to focus on the customer. Yeah. Which is probably an indictment generally for the practice of marketing, right? Like if every marketing organization is thinking about what am I doing to service the, I don't know, shareholder, a company, something, and not the customer, like there's a problem there.
So I think there's an interesting kind of, so I have this kind of thing where I talk about, when it comes to marketing, I think about relationships, I think about customer engagement, I think about that in marketing and so on and so forth. And I say that in most strong and sustainable relationships, there are sort of 2 central dynamics. There's an interesting and interested dynamic. And we've still got too many people that are trying to do this, the interesting bits, where everything's like going, look at me, grab attention sort of thing. Right. And there's not enough people that are almost doing an audit of the sort of relationship they've got and and how, I guess, narcissistic they're being about themselves. And are they really interested in their kind of customers? Are they doing something that's helpful and valuable and and useful for them?
God, I think that's right. I frame a very similar kind of discussion when I have it, or behind the idea that I think generally speaking, marketing's become pretty lazy, and by being lazy, what I mean is that we are expecting something or someone else or some entity to solve our problems for us. I use the analogy of a Roomba. We have a Roomba in our house. It doesn't work the vast majority of the time. Like, we turn it on and leave the house and hope that it cleans up.
Okay.
But the reality is that it just like rams into stuff, right? And sometimes the battery runs out, sometimes it gets stuck underneath the couch. But if I come home and it's clean, like, we're all kind of surprised. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
When we think about marketing, we almost operate similarly. We're like, I'm going to buy this thing. I'm going to buy this new service company product. I'm going to go buy this other SaaS thing. I'm going to go buy this software. And that software is going to somehow magically find, just like turn on the Roomba, the magic growth equation for me as a business. So we don't do the fundamentals. We don't do customer research. We don't do segmentation in a meaningful way consistently. We buy technology to help solve our problems, which is kind of going to your point of like, that's a little bit narcissistic. It's nice to get sold something, right? Like, somebody comes to you and they're like, you're amazing, like, you're gonna be awesome, everything's gonna be great, just buy this thing. Well, I can give you a discount. You're like, oh, I negotiated well, and I'm gonna get something that's gonna make me awesome. So we're kind of being fed by this, like, not real reality, which is something's gonna solve the growth equation that we need to have for any business we're part of. And it hurts us in so many different ways.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of waste in all of that.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But so we were going to talk about this idea around sort of trust, and because actually we go to the big trust report that comes out from Edelman, and they talk about how it was like 17% of people don't believe what companies kind of say about themselves in their particularly in their marketing and brand communications. I mean, so you come from Microsoft, you're now at Mozilla. Mozilla are this. I guess I'll tell you what, before I ask the trust question, tell me about what Mozilla is.
What we do, what we are. As an organization, I think it's a special organization. I feel privileged to be a member.
Can I say that I used to kind of use Netscape Navigator. I wanted them to win. Kind of, that's how old I am.
We appreciate that. I'm in the same age group as you. So like, there's something about when Mozilla started that sparked interest from a lot of us in our generation.
Yep.
And it kind of gets to trust, or the want for trust. Right? I'll come back around and I'll tell you kind of what Mozilla's been up to and kind of who we are right now. But like, at the end of the day, we want someone or somebody or the people that we work with to both have something that's delivering value to us, like I get something from it and that's meaningful. But I believe that inherently we all want to be associated with things and companies and brands that also deliver values that are meaningful for us as well.
Of course.
And this organization has been about that since it started 15 years ago. Like, we built a browser called Firefox. We were a big pusher of the open source free software movement. And over the course of the last 15 years, we've evolved into thinking about the way that we go to market in 4 unique ways, or distinct to us, not necessarily unique, all built behind one central premise. We believe the internet is a public resource. We believe the internet should be accessible to all, and that means equality in the way that you access content and information. We also see the internet as an ecosystem, and it's not healthy right now, right?
Yeah.
And so as an organization, everything that we do is intended to bring more people together to fight for and support a healthier internet.
Yeah.
So we do that as an organization by investing our time and our resources as a not-for-profit and a for-profit corporation that builds software in 4 things. The first is that we build technologies that we hope make the internet healthier. We invest in partnerships with Cisco and other companies to create things like Let's Encrypt, which grew from nothing to several million SSL certificates being distributed for free on the internet to more SSL websites. That's better, just generally, right? We work on kind of fundamental communication tools on the internet. We work on all kinds of new technologies that are going to show up in the future that we think could have an impact to the internet just being healthy. We match that kind of guttural platform work with product work, because product is an agency for us, for individuals, for people. So we build products like Firefox, not because we want to build massive commercial products, but because we believe that when we create a product that has value and values, and millions of people use it, that we give them more agency to help us individually and collectively protect and support a healthy internet.
And what's fascinating about that, actually, because Firefox now is the 2nd or 3rd?
We've now surpassed IE and Edge together, so we're the 2nd.
Okay.
But our market share is in the 14 to 15% range, depending upon where you look at it.
Right.
Which is probably enough to make impact on the internet, but we'd like it to be higher because we believe that the more people that use a product like Firefox, the more agency they have across the internet.
But I think what's interesting about that is that you're doing it as a not-for-profit, not really big organization, facing these other sort of like, the behemoths that are, Apple and Google and so
We're
on and
an
so forth.
1,100 person organization with thousands of volunteers that support us, and the companies that build products that are competitive to us are Google at 100-something thousand people, and Microsoft at 100-something thousand people. They're big, and their motivations are different.
Yeah, no,
it's not good, bad, or indifferent. Like, they're just different.
Yeah.
And us as individuals get to make a choice with the brands that we want to associate ourselves with. So we hope that plays a bigger role in the way that we go to market. In addition to kind of that core platform work and the product work, we also do quite a bit of policy work. So our policy team goes out and works with local governments, I say local, we're here in the U.S., right? In Louisiana, so we'll work with state legislature, we'll work with the federal government, and we'll try and push forward legislation that we believe supports a healthy internet over time. Okay. And we'll also combat that when it's necessary. We do that through our advocacy work, which is kind of a pair to the policy work.
And do you think that, is that, I want to talk about kind of trust and kind of the challenge and stuff, and does that all kind of fold into kind of what we do all this because, one, we think it matters, and two, because it also helps us build trust with kind of people, is that the big mission?
It's absolutely related to the mission, right? So that fourth piece that we spend our time on is we work on web literacy programs. We want to teach people that the internet isn't just Facebook in India, right? And that's not to say something negative about Facebook, but we want individuals to understand that when they have agency on the internet, they can do just about anything. The way that we work as an organization is all built behind this mission that we have to maintain an open and accessible internet. The only way we can do that at the size that we are, with the kind of resources that we have, is to develop products and go-to-market strategies and programs that depend upon individuals trusting us.
Sure.
Like, if we don't do that, it doesn't work, because we can't afford, and we never will be able to afford, to compete head-to-head on like the marketing world of Google and Microsoft. We just can't.
No.
So we have to think about it different. And the way that we start to frame that now is actually taking those 4 areas of work and doing the hard work, which we've done over the last few years, of understanding who the key audience is that we actually should be building for, because we see a group of people that can have an outsized impact on the health of the internet. So, we did research that started back about 2 years ago, and that research helped us validate kind of a thesis that we had, and you probably feel this as well. I certainly felt this as somebody who wasn't educated on it initially. I kind of felt like I was making purchase decisions, and I saw other people making purchase decisions that weren't necessarily about just the utility or the value of stuff. I'd choose to go shop at a Whole Foods, and I do that knowing full well that I was going to spend more money, but I believe that by spending more money at this place, Whole Foods, because I had the resources to do it, I was actually supporting local farmers. And that was important to me. Those values are important to me. So I kind of saw this. We saw this as an organization, like, these things are happening. People are making a decision to work with and buy from a brand. You buy shoes from Tom's, you buy glasses from Warby Parker. These are just American companies as examples, but they're fresh in my mind right now. And I thought maybe there's something else there. We thought maybe there's something else there. So we went out, we did a pretty big longitudinal study, went out and looked at kind of behaviors of different groups of people all over the world. I think our N was several thousand people. And this research came back and showed us that this hypothesis that there are a group of people that are kind of doing things differently was actually true. So we proved this hypothesis, and we found a group of people who had some behavioral characteristics that were fairly consistent. Like, one, they were making purchase decisions based on the values, not just the value of the brand. So that was fascinating. They were generally a little bit more aware of the kind of data that they were giving back and forth to these companies. It's not to say that they were wearing tinfoil hats or that they were like crazy from a privacy perspective on taking care of themselves. It just meant that they were a little bit more aware of, like, if I go to this thing, if I use this service, I understand that I'm giving something up for it in return. This group tended to skew a little bit younger, but not like decidedly attached to one particular group or another. Like of the
so it's like an ethnography rather than a demography.
Yeah, exactly. The kind of commonalities in those behavioral traits to me, and even a little bit of the kind of demographics of them, made me think and made us think that this group of people probably has something that we would describe as like a millennial mindset.
Right.
And like a millennial mindset to me really means that like they develop a relationship. The millennial group generally develop relationships because they believe that there's going to be a value exchange that's there, and they trust that that's going to happen. And if that value exchange doesn't happen, they're gone. Right?
Yep.
Right. So like trust is at its core. may be all interesting, and obviously I'm not showing you all of the data right here while we're chatting, but this group of people existing to us was pretty meaningful.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well maybe this is a group of people that's growing faster, maybe they're of a big enough size, maybe they're 5, 6, 7% of the population of the world. Who knows, let's figure it out. So we did a sizing study to match this kind of ethnographic study, and what we found is, so we looked specifically at the internet population, so we took the general internet population, which is maybe between 3.3 and 3.6 billion people and growing a bunch right now. And we tried to size them against that volume. And what we found is that this group of people that we've named the conscious chooser, it's our kind of our made-up name for this particular segment, they make up about 21% of the population of the internet right now.
And are they on a...
And they're growing faster. So
than the general population.
This is 750 to 950, maybe 1 billion people in the world have these characteristics of they care about trust.
Yeah.
Right? They're growing faster. They spend a little bit more money than most. They're aware of value exchange, and they care about the values and the value that are being delivered to them. So that's a pretty interesting group of people.
Yeah.
Our organization is using that as the kind of voice of our customer, the view of the voice of our customer, and obviously we do involve the hard and good marketing segmentation work underneath that, and personas and in. But we now have a group of people that we believe if we're serving better behind our mission, that they're going to help this mission move faster than if it were just us and a collective of people that we attract to our products.
So actually, kind of and then that sort of is another kind of question around. So that means, or does that mean that actually the purpose of your firm, whether it's your firm or any other sort of firm, and the trust that you build and the engagement that you have with your customers, your clients, your consumers, or users, or whatever sort of word you want to use, they're intrinsically linked.
I think that they are, and here's the challenge that I've been talking to my peers about over the past few months that I don't have a good answer for yet, but I think that there's something there that needs to be found.
Yeah.
Like when we consider the dynamics of an organization, like what we consider to be success, we all know that growth up and to the right is important, and that generally is the thing that we talk about in the board meeting. CAGR, growth, product, whatever. There's some sort of a growth metric that is the driver for everything in the business. I believe, my hypothesis is that it actually needs a peer measure, and that peer measure needs to be about trust.
Yep.
And it's not NPS, and it's not CSAT. Maybe that feeds into it, just like you think about growth, but it needs to be there, and it's not there yet. So when we've been bouncing this around, one of the things that Justin and our communications team helped me with is we did some additional research, kind of secondary research. We took a look at lists of companies that are considered to be highly trusted. So there's a list that's published by Forbes and SurveyMonkey does work with it each year. It's the 100 most trusted companies, and there's a bunch of different variables that you guys look at. It's a pretty big end too that you do with SurveyMonkey as well. And one of the things that we were curious about, we were like, okay, if you take this group of 100 companies, most trusted companies according to Forbes and SurveyMonkey, probably there's going to be a relationship to their general performance and companies that aren't on this list. And probably, let's say we take the S&P 500 and that Fortune 100 most trusted list, probably that 100 most trusted companies is going to perform better on maybe like an arbitrary metric, but still a growth metric like public stock performance.
Right.
So we set out to see if that was true. So we looked at the last 5 years and the average of the S&P 500 and the average of the 100 most trusted companies' stock performance. And what we found is actually pretty fascinating. It wasn't a differential between the 100 most trusted companies from a public stock performance perspective and the S&P 500. It was actually within the context of that Fortune 100 list that we found a big differential.
Right.
The top 10 companies in the most trusted list and the bottom 10 companies had a 26-point differential in performance.
Okay.
So it's pretty fascinating to see this, like pulling some stuff together to try and make this story fit better for us. But we were really surprised and pretty excited to see that we actually see a performance in public stock performance, the top 10 most trusted companies and the bottom 10 most trusted companies. The gap is actually much bigger if you go to S&P 500. There's a performance element that trust plays a role into that we aren't able to quantify. And I say we, like all business right now is not able to quantify it yet, but I believe that we're going to get there.
Yeah, I think so. I think that the way that it's going to evolve, I think the way it has to evolve because I'm interested in service and experience, and one of the themes I've been talking about recently is about being, brilliant at the basics.
Yeah.
And it's a thing that's. It's almost like a foundational level of kind of trust building, right?
Yeah.
Get it right all the time, every time, all that sort of stuff. But then and I think that's the base level, and a lot of people don't get that. And then there's a kind of like there's next level sort of stuff, which is then the surprise and sort of delight potential bit.
Yep.
But there's a thing that could possibly compete with that. What you're talking about is that bigger purpose type of stuff.
I totally agree. Yeah.
And there becomes this kind of mix. It's almost like you have to do this bit, the foundational bit, brilliant, the basics, get that right.
Yeah.
But then there's these kind of like, I feel like, foundation sort of seams that run through it, which is we're going to build on the basics and then be a surprised, joyful, and delightful sort of brand, or we're just going to be a purpose-driven brand, or can we do both?
Well, I like to tie back to the beginning of the conversation also, like this idea that the fundamentals are important for us and they're actually essential in building trust, play a role into the laziness of marketing generally.
Yeah.
Like we practice a thing that came from a very good relationship that we have with our legal department, which is not the first thing that you hear heads of marketing say, I got a great relationship with our legal team. We do, not because we look to our legal team purely as a group of people who help us evaluate risk, right? And we tell them what our tolerance for risk is, and they say, well, you've gone past that or not. Like, we see our legal team as a great partner in helping us find all the opportunities to develop more trust with our customers.
Yeah.
And one of the most critical ways that our legal team has helped us is by developing a practice that we call lean data practices at Mozilla. And lean data practices are kind of simple from a philosophical perspective and kind of simple from a practical perspective, but operationally they're actually really difficult because of the laziness of marketers historically to implement. And they kind of go like this. The basic idea is that if you don't surprise your customers in a negative way, you have a better chance at building trust, right? It is the fundamental.
It's a neuroscientific hard evidence that supports that. You just go look at it and just go, we have a survival instinct. So, we don't want to die.
So
avoid risk, disappointment, failure at all costs.
So how do you build a great experience with that as the premise? Understanding the tools of the trade of marketers today, right? Like, we've got lots of technology that we can buy. We can do all kinds of crazy things. The first kind of piece of the three pieces in lean data are to force the asking of the question on behalf of the marketing team and the organization to your customer of what exactly are you going to give me and what exactly am I going to give you back?
That's the value exchange idea.
And not ask for anything more than that. So I'll give you a super simple example of this. And this is very specific to Mozilla. So we've improved our practices in marketing dramatically over the last few years. And a big piece of that has been our willingness to actually allow our customers to give us some of their data. The way that we've been doing that, I think, is kind of novel. And very specifically, we've been not asking for data that we know we can't take action to deliver value back on.
Okay.
In a very simple example, on our email programs 2 years ago, we were not asking for anything other than email address, not even region, not even language, because we didn't have the ability to actually do anything with it. It's not that it wasn't important to us. It's not that we didn't want to have a sophisticated program where we had, life cycle management and different cues on kind of where you are in the product, and we cared about the language that you're in and the region that you're in, and didn't have cultural sensitivities, because all that's true. But we didn't operationally have the ability to do anything with it. So we just didn't ask our customers for it.
The blood drains from my face when people start talking about data warehouses, and then now is the new thing is data lakes.
Yeah.
I find that just frightening. I mean, a data lake would be like a data ocean next, so you're just going to give a little bit of a data planet somewhere. Right. I'm like going, how much data do you need? And are you going to do, if you're not doing amazing shit with it, then stop.
Then don't do it. And you don't need to keep it forever.
Well,
but this is a counter idea to the way that we've been taught over the course of the last decade, at least, right? A colleague of mine who is at Upfront Ventures, is a partner there, Kobe Fuller. I did a bunch of research about 2 years ago, and we looked at how many companies existed that were selling technologies to marketers. And we found at the time, a couple of years ago, that there were about 1,100. Which seems like a lot, right? Like, I, as a marketer, have 1,100 different companies. They probably have multiple products that I can...
It's like a tool shed.
Right?
You're like, oh, no, nowadays it's a tool warehouse.
And the one commonality of those 1,100 different companies is they all basically did the same three things. They helped you collect data in some capacity, they stored it and cardinalized it so that you could take action on it, and then they allowed you to take some action, right? Connecting the data somewhere else, sending an email, doing whatever. 1,100 companies that collect, store, and take action on data. Fast forward to, I think, like 4 months ago, a friend of mine, a guy named Scott Brinker, who writes the Chief Martech blog and runs the Martech conferences, he did the same basic research and updated it. Found that there are 2,800 companies right now.
2,800.
We're talking like in a year and a half, we've seen a plus 100% growth in the number of companies that collect customer data, store it, and take action on it. So as marketers, like, the idea that we're going to just ask for everything or scrape everything and then figure out what to do with it later is kind of just the table stakes. But I don't think it's right.
But yeah, well, exactly. But there's also an assumption in there around, there's this. It's like an informed imbalance, as it were. There's a naivety that's kind of this growing kind of like thing. It's almost a bit like, just because you can collect the data doesn't mean that you should.
Right.
And even if you do, then you should have an informed conversation kind of with the customer, going like, we're going to do this, and this is why, and this is what we're going to use it for, and that's all. There's a lot of obfuscation kind of going on around that, and I'm just thinking...
We're just trying to buy more Roombas. We're like, all right, I have one Roomba, so I got to get the Roomba that does just the mopping, and I got to get the other Roomba that does the other thing, that does the window cleaning. Not to knock on Roombas, they're fine, but like we are just trying to have somebody else solve the problem for us, which is fundamentally putting us at risk to destroy the trust with our customers.
Yeah,
right?
and so all this data and privacy. I mean, I think that's another big sort of vector that was going to come out. And I mean, it's already happening. Yeah, but it's not quite.
It's not at a systemic level to the point where it stopped the behaviors that we have, right? No. So we're kind of proactively using these tools of lean data that we developed with the legal team and our policy team. The first being, like, don't ask for data that you're not going to use, that you're not going to deliver value with. Sure. The reality is that you have to change the culture in your organization as a marketer to say, I'm not going to ask for every bit of data that I can because I can't deliver value from it. So that's the first piece. The second piece, it has a kind of a storyline that relates to something that I'm sure you're super familiar with. Over the past decade, we've been talking about the relationship with the marketer and the CTO, and like how do those two departments work together, and who's doing what, and marketing's replacing it, and all that stuff. It kind of doesn't really matter. Like, the fundamental thing that we have to do as marketers, if we're going to go out and buy from one of those 2,800 different companies that collect customer data, store customer data, and take action on it, we need to understand how our data is being managed in the same way that our IT team would. Like, as marketers, we have to, because if we don't, like, we run a greater risk of exposing our customers' data to somebody else, and that's going to destroy the trust that we have with them. So it's a requirement.
Well, it's bigger than that. You put your firm at an existential kind of risk, and your legal team's going to go, what?
Right, but on the business side, we have to say as marketers, if I go negotiate a deal with an ESP, CRM company, DMP, like any of those companies that are going to collect data for us, we have to be not relying on our IT team or somebody else on our security team. We have to be responsible for understanding how our customer data is being collected, how it's being stored, if it's being encrypted, who has access to it, how long it's going to live in whatever the storage is, what happens if that data gets breached somewhere. Like, we have to have the responsibility in marketing to make sure that we're creating a great customer experience that establishes trust, to make sure that we understand those.
And then that kind of that goes back to your thing around your sort of idea around conscious choosers. Yes. Because then it's not just about the sustainability of the purpose of the firm and what they're doing, but it's also about the sustainability of the behaviors and the practices between in that relationship. It's like, don't abuse me. You might be doing some good stuff, but if we don't have a sustainable relationship, then my conscious consumption and my conscious choice is I'm choosing this relationship, and I'm choosing kind of what you're doing as well.
If I am ever so lucky to have you as a customer and you use Firefox, it's my responsibility and my role, and it's our head of product's responsibility and their role to make sure that we're always delivering value for you and making sure that you're not in a position where your information can be used in a way that you're not sure that it's going to be used. Because when that happens, it's really easy for you to switch off of our product. Right? It doesn't cost anything. So the trust factor for us is even more important. The third piece of this kind of lean data practice is really getting to the user experience and how the user experiences relationship with data. I use an iPhone, I can see. There was an update that came out like 2 weeks ago. It was like the 10.4.3 something 2 release or whatever. I don't know if you update frequently. I update frequently. So I get like the little red notification on my phone. I click it, I go in, it's like, do you want to install? Sure, great, it downloads it, the wheel spin, and then it pops up a note. And the note takes up like 3/4 of the screen. And on it, there's like legalese something, and I'm like scroll down, and I keep scrolling, I'm scrolling. Like, all right, well, to use my phone again, I have to hit accept. Otherwise, I can't roll it back. Sure. So I guess I have to accept it, but I have absolutely no idea what was on that thing, because one, I didn't want to take the time, and two, I didn't even understand it. So the third idea in lean data practices is that when you have an interaction with a customer where data or an ask for data or a promise that something's going to happen shows up, speak to the user in a way that makes sense for them in the form factor that makes sense. And so an example of that, this is a Mozilla Firefox example, is that if you're to use Firefox for iOS or Focus, one of the two products that we have for iOS, when you look at the privacy policy, you can read it on a single screen.
Yeah.
And it's written...
We're going to do this, this, and this, but we're not going to do this, this, and this. Right?
Exactly. And to your point, it fits on a screen. It's also written in English that's decipherable for somebody who's not a lawyer.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, if you want to read the legalese bit, click here, and we'll take you through to the kind of the full terms and conditions.
Our legal team is amazing. They've gone so far as to not go into that ad nauseum detail because it's actually not necessary. It doesn't establish trust.
It's not helpful.
If you clearly articulate what you're going to be doing, how it's going to interact, right? That's what we need to do. That's our responsibility. So the lean data practices, for me and for our organization, and part of the reason that I like to talk about them, especially in like the marketing talk speaker track stuff, is that I think our responsibility in marketing is to help create a great customer experience.
Yeah.
To do that, we've got to make sure that we're establishing the best opportunity to create and maintain trust with our customers. And that actually is going to help us perform better.
Yeah.
And if we perform better and do that, like that gives us the potential for sustainability as a business. And like that's kind of what we're being paid to do.
Yeah.
We just have to do it in a way that really makes sense. So it's a cool spot to be, right? That I get
I mean,
to both do marketing and talk about marketing.
One final kind of question, and it's one of the reasons I know that you're here to. You're going to talk about all this sort of stuff tomorrow at Collision. But there's a thing around ethics in marketing, because that's something I'm noticing. I mean, and it's something I'm sort of been kind of watching. I mean, because we've got this rise in tools and data and privacy issues, and what we're talking about is sort of trust dimension, but then we've got this other sort of insights and advancements coming from behavioral economics and then behavioral design. I mean, crumbs. Do we need a chief ethics officer, or is that what the CEO should be? Should the E is not executive, but his E is experience and ethics and everything else?
Well, I think you called to the right position in the company to help inform and reinforce change. So I've been doing what I've been doing now for 20 years, and I've been a part of big for-profit companies. I've been in little startups, venture-backed startups. I've been in companies owned by private equity firms. And I said this when we started off, I feel privileged to be at Mozilla. Part of that is that I love the work that I get to do. I like marketing. I really like the team that I get to work with. I like the products that we build. I like who we stand for. But the other piece for me that I didn't understand fully until I joined and had a chance to be immersed there is that our organization is built behaviorally to reinforce decisions on behalf of the people that we build our products and our services for. And that statement probably falls on deaf ears because you hear it from just about everybody. I'm here to change the world. I'm going to build this whatever. I'm going to, that's the promise everywhere in the technology world in particular. We're going to build the next thing that's going to change the world for this reason. We want to make sure that individuals have agency on the internet. And our decision-making structure, the board to the CEO to the executives that brought in, are financially incented, right? We get paid to, our bonuses are attached to our ability to create benefit for our customers, not create value for our shareholders. And that's not to say that the shareholder model is broken or bad, but I think you'll start to hear more and more discussion from venture capitalists, from founder CEOs of smaller companies, that the focus on just quarterly profit and quarterly growth is actually making it more difficult for them to build good, strong customer relationships over time, which is ultimately making them or forcing them to make decisions that are ethically questionable. So yes, it's the CEO's responsibility to be the chief ethics officer, but I think that there's a more systemic challenge that we've got to figure out how to counterbalance to. We've got to buoy the side of this equation that is focused on developing trust with customers to a point where it's raised to the board level, to the CEO, executive committee discussions. And that's what we can do now in marketing. We can talk about the tactical practices like lean data practices. We can implement those and still see success, growth, do all the things that we need to do. And then when we have the discussion with our board and our CEO, we can express how making smart, ethical decisions on behalf of our users develops trust and benefits the business. But the challenge that you identified is one that is systemically attached to the financial incentives of most organizations. And this is a long game that we have to play to change it.
We're in a transitionary era. There's the era of our mothers and fathers. We're, I guess, of a similar age group in that we know what pre-internet looks like, and what business looks like pre-internet, and now kind of like the impact. So it's almost like there's overlapping, and it's like, it's hurting some people.
My own personal theory is from some study in kind of behavioral psychology and ethnography about the different generations and how the different generations have basically been taught to interact and reinforced. So you have the baby boomers, which is an enormous generation who came back from the Depression and the World War and basically focused on how do I make everything as efficient as possible? How do I get as much value and utility as possible?
Sure.
And that's great. And it drove nearly every facet of commercial enterprise, right? How do you get more sugar into this can of beans so that more people buy it? How do you get this distribution chain less expensive? Like, how do you do that? The Gen X group that I think we're a part of, we kind of fit into that, but also we're part of some very substantive changes to culture because of the advancement of these public resources or things that we'd like to be public resources like the internet. And now we see millennials and Gen Z who are a lot more attuned to the idea that their decision for buying isn't about utility anymore. It's not just about the value of the thing that they're getting, it's about the values and the value. So I think you're right. I think we're in this kind of massive sea change culturally in the things that we work with, the services that we buy from, the brands that we care about. But the economic systems aren't kind of aligned to this social change or cultural change that's in process.
Yeah, I think we're going through some growing pains. Still
totally.
Still figuring it out.
Totally.
Jascha, it's been a pleasure.
That's been awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.